for divinity, for patristics, for family Bibles. And so, as we all know, Boswell decided to publish in Quarto instead, and that changed a lot. But 10% seems pretty high for Malone to make his observation. Nobody reads a folio nowadays. So that suggests the artifactual nature of the data, it seems to me. Other times we can have pretty simple explanations, like here, the way the Quarto is just falling. Well, of course, because Quartos were used as plate for publishing play text, and there's a marked switch in the publishing of play text in the early 18th century, that is the publishing of drama, and saying play text, not play text, I promise. Okay, so there's a market fall here because one of the main markets for the Quarto was for drama that shifts to smaller formats. Of course, those of you who are interested in paper know better than I do that the size of the sheet also gets bigger, and that makes the smaller format more accommodating. So the Octavo, between 50 and 60%, almost certainly should be higher, and so too for the Duodecimo. What's interesting here, perhaps, to think about is the one-sheet format. These include both single pamphlets, the folded sheets, and, if you will, broadside. What's perhaps interesting to think about is this here and this here. Is it really true that at the beginning of the century and at the end of the century there are a lot more one-sheet formats than in the middle? That seems counterintuitive. And I think if we interrogate the data here, what we find is that there are substantial collections of ephemera that concentrate late in the century and early in the century in their collections. And these collections are recorded in the SCC, and therefore the whole graph should probably be somewhere up in here, and that the one-sheet formats are actually, in fact, a much higher percentage of publishing than we might ordinarily think. Again, because of their low survival rate. So finally, if we look at the length here of the publications, we tend to think of the 18th century as a time when there are a lot of books published, but if you look at one sheet and 2 to 10 sheets, over 80% of the books for most of the period are 10 sheets or fewer. And if you remember that little books last week, then this number again needs to be much, much higher. And there are good financial reasons why the vast majority of books published in the 18th century are 10 sheets or fewer, and that is because the huge amount of capital that one has to tie up in typesetting, printing, paper, and so on, and that's going to tie up capital for a very long period of time. So you want to get the maximum out of your investment. A lot of people don't have a lot of capital. Cash flow is a major problem, especially with the extended credit terms, 18 months routinely given to a customer who's a, frequenting a London bookseller, 18 months to pay with no interest. It's tying up a great deal of capital. So you've got to publish shorter things so that you don't go bankrupt. So the one sheet clearly needs to be higher. There's just no question. The 2 to 10 sheets probably should be higher again because they are little books and they are going to last less. It seems to me interesting that the number of big books is going up during the century. And that may be because of changes in capitalization. That may be because of the improvement in the paper trade, the domestic paper trade in England itself. I'm not really sure why the number of, as it were, longer books is able to rise the way it does. Again, I would welcome to hear your input. But I have a theory about why books 21 sheets and over go down. And that is because of the increase in multi-volume books. And of course, the increase in multi-volume books goes with the circulating library and so on. And I needn't rehearse that story here. we see that although the numbers are still very small, multi-volume books, especially in this lower end of the market, is going up and up and up. Of course, we have to bear in mind that multi-volume works have higher survival rates than single-volume works. And so, is there any way to use some of this data to think about survival rates for single-volume works? I'm working on that right now. It's a kind of mathematical problem, but I'm not very hopeful that I'll be able to learn very much. The number of books greater than 5 volumes, look at the scale, goes up almost not at all, 0.1% over the 18th century. Very curious, especially when we think about some of those changes in the book trade. But that's what the data tells us, and we need to think about it. Tonight's reflections might remind us that, on the one hand, we need to investigate the surviving record. We need to try to get as much as we can out of what we have. But at the same time, even as we are doing so, we should bear in mind that an important epistemological principle that all our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance. Thank you.
I hope you will join our speaker for an informal reception that begins right now in the first floor Alderman Library Set.